Willys MB Carburetor Installation. Let's take a close look here at the intake manifold on the L134 engine, and I've cleaned the mating surface with acetone as well as taken a dye and ran it over the threads here on the studs just to make sure that they were all good. If you're cleaning these areas while the manifold is on the engine, make sure you don't get any debris down inside the intake manifold. Here we have the gasket with the diffuser. It's part number A6357. Notice the bushing that's incorporated into the gasket. That is what's going to make the seal onto the stud on the manifold. So we'll install it just like this, with the diffuser facing into the intake manifold. I'm pretty excited to show you this. This is a brand new, made under license of Carter, 539S WO carburetor, and I've already got the brass elbow installed for the fuel line. These carburetors are absolutely beautiful and again are brand new. They're available at Ron Fitzpatrick Jeep Parts. Catalog part number is A1223. Watch closely here as I install this, and I'm sorry you can't see my hand back here, but you'll have to hold up the carburetor just so the threads go through the mounting base and get the nut started before you can tighten it to the manifold. This is a little difficult to do, but just keep the carburetor steady and thread the nut on and lower the carburetor down as you proceed to tighten the nut on the studs. I'll show you with the camera exactly why in just a second. Here's the nut I just installed. It's the one facing the front of the Jeep, and you can see here on the base of the carb why it's difficult to get that nut in over the stud. The one to the rear is much easier to get at, but we've got a little accessory that's very important we have to install first. This is the return spring clip, and it's part number A1173. There's a small hole on one end and a larger hole on the other end. Install the clip with the large hole onto the stud that holds the carburetor on and face the angle of the clip upwards. Then you can install the nut over the top of the clip and tighten it. The small hole on the clip faces directly towards the rear of the engine and 90 degrees to the base of the manifold. When searching for torque specs to install the 8x24-inch nuts that hold the carburetor on, I found nothing really definitive. The manual states to tighten the two bolts evenly until they compress the gasket between the manifold and the base of the carburetor. So what I'm doing here is going back and forth and turning the nuts evenly, 1 or 2 rotations at a time, and then back and forth until they actually are tight and snug by hand. Once I've got the nuts where I believe that they're hand tight, I'll try to get another 1/4 to a 1/2 turn on each one of them just to ensure that they've compressed the two bushings inside the gasket. That is what makes the seal around the studs. Let's take a close look here at the gasket once it's been installed. This can be a problematic area for the L134 engine. If this gasket doesn't seal, the engine will perform poorly, so you really want to be sure that those bushings are crushed inside and it really seals tightly against the manifold. I've got my small parts for the Accelerator Rod all primed and painted up with RFJP paint products, and they're the correct color OD green for the 43 Willys MB. The Accelerator Rod is part number A1175. It has a threaded end and then a 90-degree angle bend on one side with a hole drill in it. The first thing we will do is install the small nut onto the threads. I'm only going to thread the nut onto the threads about 3/4 of an inch for the time being. Next, we'll install the spring clip, part number 639610. It's the small clip. Install it with the short side onto the rod and the longer side facing towards the front of the accelerator rod. Thread the block, part number 633013, onto the threads of the rod, and you can just hand tighten this for the time being because we will make a little adjustment later in the video. I'm at the front side of the base of the carburetor, and I want to show you here on the throttle plate arm exactly where the location of the accelerator rod goes through. There's a drilled hole right here in the top, and here from the back we can see it as I pull it backwards. That's where you're going to insert the angled piece of the accelerator rod. Insert the bent end of the accelerator rod with the tip facing towards the base of the carburetor. Then install the small cotter key into the drilled hole on the end of the accelerator rod with the legs facing downward. Next, using a pair of small needle nose pliers, bend the legs on the cotter key, one folded backward and the other folded forward. I know there's lots of different methods for installing cotter keys. I like to make each one of the legs as a C shape around the actual accelerator rod end, as shown. You want the legs of the cotter key tight to the end of the accelerator rod, but not in a fashion that would bind them or cause it to hit or strike the side of the carburetor base or the outside butterfly. Install the small stud on the block of the accelerator linkage into the accelerator linkage that's bolted to the back side of the block. Then we'll install the very same cotter key and fashion it in the same way as we did the one on the front side near the carburetor. The drilled arm that's on top of the accelerator linkage that is attached to the engine block should be in a forward position right now. There is a final adjustment for this, but it has to be done after the tub and the accelerator pedal have been installed. After we get the legs on the cotter key bent up, we'll double check to make sure we're not binding in any area on the block. The next step is to install the accelerator return spring, part number 633011. On the clip that's on the carburetor, the spring hook is facing down, and then on the smaller spring that's attached to the accelerator rod, the spring will be attached with the hook facing up as shown. Notice once again how the spring clip on the carburetor is facing up and the smaller spring on the accelerator rod is facing down. Check again once here for any binding as this rod pulls and opens the throttle plate inside the carburetor. The last step in the installation is to tighten the small nut up against the spring clip and the block on the accelerator rod. Use a wrench and hold the mechanism with your hand so nothing turns, and simply tighten the small nut until it is snug against the block, holding the clip in place. When the tub is installed, we'll go back and adjust the length of the throttle rod so when the carb throttle valve is wide open, the accelerator pedal will not strike the toe board inside the tub. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do so at Team G503 on YouTube. All parts provided by Ron Fitzpatrick Jeep Parts.